Planning and Right of Way Committee. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, and we're here in the Council Chamber and also being broadcast live on YouTube, and also which will be recorded for future viewing. So the first item on the agenda, with me is Councillor Jim Creamer, my Vice Chairman, and the first item on the agenda are any apologies for absence, please.
I have apologies, Chairman, from Councillor Andy Meakin and Councillor Daniel Williamson.
Thank you very much. And item 2, do any members and officers here have any disclosable pecuniary interests to declare? Nope. And do any members and officers present have any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? No. Okay, thank you. And so that's that. And item 3 is if we have any declarations of lobbying. Do any members wish to declare any incidents of lobbying? No, nothing to declare on that. So, item 4, minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 1st of November. That's item 4 on the agenda. Those of us who were here, are we happy that they're a correct record of the... Yep, okay, thank you. I'll sign those later. So we'll come into the main item on the agenda today, which is variation of planning condition for land off private road number 3 at the Colwick Industrial Estate, Colwick. And I will move the recommendations as set out in the report. And can I have a seconder, please?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much. So I'll now hand over to Mr. Hankin, if you'd like to talk us through the application, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. This report considers a Section 73 planning application to modify the existing odour controls imposed as part of a planning permission for the development of a waste transfer station at Colwick Industrial Estate. Planning permission for the Colwick Waste Management Facility was granted by Nottinghamshire County Council on the 16th of September 2021. The approved design of the waste facility permitted waste transfer and processing activities, including scope to manage segregated food waste and produce refuse-derived fuel. The approved design of the waste transfer building incorporates an odour abatement system, which is designed to remove odours from the waste transfer building and control their release to the wider environment. The planning permission has not been implemented. In terms of the site, it incorporates 2.1 hectares of industrial land, which is centrally located within Colwick Industrial Estate, with road frontages onto private road numbers 3 and 5. The site is currently undeveloped and used for open storage of drilling machinery and empty waste skips and containers owned by Veolia. The land surrounding the application site is generally industrial in character, but a new Sainsbury's retail store has recently been developed 80 metres to the northwest, with the more established Morrison's supermarket 150 metres to the north. The nearest residential properties are located within Netherfield to the north, beyond Colwick Loop Road, at a distance of around 280 metres. In terms of the development sought planning permission, permission is sought to vary the previously agreed odour management controls for the site. Specifically, Condition 24 criteria C and D, which require the installation and use of an air filtration plant during the daytime period when refuse-derived fuel was to be manufactured, and also the application seeks to modify the controls which require roof-mounted air vents to be closed during the night time. The applicant explains that they have reviewed the development and would like to initially operate the site as a waste transfer station without undertaking the potentially more odorous refuse-derived fuel manufacturing and the importation storage of segregated food waste. During this period, the applicant would like to modify the odour controls regulated under Condition 24 to permit the facility to operate without the necessity to install and operate the air filtration system and the closure of the vents at night time, whilst it works as a waste transfer station. Subsequently, the air filtration plant would be installed and the louvers closed at night prior to the commencement of refuse-derived fuel production activities or segregated food waste storage, and thereafter operated at all times when the site is used for these purposes. In terms of the consultation process, the Council has received no objections to this plan application. In terms of the planning considerations, this current planning application requires an assessment to be made as to whether the alterations to the site's operation in terms of modifying the composition of waste imported to the site, the arrangements for treating and processing this waste, and the arrangements to no longer install and use the previously approved air filtration equipment during periods when the facility would not be used for refuse-derived fuel production or the delivery and storage of segregated food waste would continue to provide satisfactory odour control. In terms of containment of odour in the building, the proposed move away from the use of the mechanical air filtration plant during the daytime periods to a passive ventilation system has potential to increase the risk that fugitive odours could be released to the wider environment. However, this needs to be balanced against the fact that the levels of odour released from the facility are likely to be reduced when it is not used for manufacturing refuse-derived fuel or storing source-segregated food. In making a judgment as to whether the level of odour control is appropriate to protect the amenity of those living and working nearby, the decision should have regard to policy advice within the National Planning Policy Framework and the National Planning Policy for Waste. These documents state that waste planning authorities should work on the basis that the pollution control regime will be properly applied and enforced, and planning decisions should not duplicate these controls. Since the County Council issued the planning permission for the site, the operator has obtained an environmental permit from the Environment Agency to operate the site in accordance with the modified controls currently sought planning permission. Therefore, this current planning application would ensure that the operation of the site permitted under the planning permission is consistent with the environment permit for the site in terms of odour control. It is acknowledged that industry practice for waste transfer stations is that they generally operate without the necessity to have air filtration equipment installed. This is evidenced in Nottinghamshire, where all the operational waste transfer stations do not incorporate air filtration systems, with the exception being the Veolia facility at Welshcroft Close, Kirkby in Ashfield, which does have air filtration plant installed, but the facility incorporates a refuse-derived manufacturing facility. Overall, it is considered reasonable and appropriate for this planning decision to proceed on the basis that odour emissions from the facility will be controlled and regulated under the environmental permit, and these controls will ensure that the revised method of operation now sought planning permission would not result in significant levels of odour emissions which would adversely affect the amenity of occupiers of nearby land. It is therefore recommended that the requirements in condition 24C and D is modified to reflect this. The recommendation therefore is to support a grant of planning permission subject to the revised wording of condition 24 as set out within Appendix A of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. Now, as the applicant has submitted a request in advance of this meeting to address the committee in relation to the application, I'll now invite the representative from Veolia, the applicant, to speak. That's Mr. Lee Hawkes. I just need to remind you that you have up to 3 minutes to address the committee, and if you're still speaking after 2 minutes, the clerk will tell you there's 1 minute left to go, and when you reach 3 minutes, we have to stop you, and we'll obviously make that clear to you. Also, I just need to remind in general that you shouldn't introduce any new information beyond the information that's already submitted as part of the application, nor raise any matters that are not material to the planning process. So with that said, Mr. Hawkes, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I'm not going to take 3 minutes, I promise. So I don't have a lot to say other than Veolia supports the recommendations of the planning officer, and I'm here really to answer any questions that you've got about the operations that will take place at the transfer station.
Well, you were well within 3 minutes there. That's pretty good going. So yes, we do normally have an opportunity for members to ask for points of clarification from the speaker, but you've actually made it clear that you're prepared to take some questions. So with that in mind, I think we can do that. So it can't turn into a debate though. This is keep clarifications in your mind, even though you're asking questions. So just if you've got any questions, just be very clear, but it can't be at this stage turn into a debate with the applicant. And then once the applicant has spoken, we then debate amongst ourselves about the application. So does anyone have any questions or points of clarification? So the first hand that went up was actually Councillor Smith, and then and then Councillor Adams afterwards. So Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just a clarification on what Mike said, but maybe you could answer this. So the original proposal was to use it as an RDF plant, which we're saying the air filters will be required for. Now we're saying it's not going to be used for RDF for a few years. It's going to be used for what? What exactly is it going to be used for in the meantime? I just misheard what you said, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So originally we were hoping to use it to produce RDF because it opens up more outlets for us, but the way the waste strategy and stuff has been delayed means that in the initial period we won't need to do that. So it'll be just purely a bulking station. So the material will come in, we'll bulk it and take it to the various end destinations that we need to do.
Thank you. And Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation, Mike. But yeah, just to, if I may, having been to the site in Worksop the other day, as the rubbish gets brought in, dropped into the location, and then the rubbish is obviously then packaged up and stuck into a bigger truck and sent away. As liquid can be present in products like waste, what methods are put in place to clean after a period of time the rubbish is taken and brought in and taken away to remove any of the liquid element that obviously will remain? Is there any at all, or is it just accepted that it's lifted up and off it goes?
So the facilities are designed to have a sealed drainage system which goes through an interceptor, so any hydrocarbons are taken out before it goes, and we have to have a discharge consent to go to waters, so sewage and stuff. But in terms of the liquids you're talking about and the odours, we have a regular cleaning regime, but we also do what's called a deep clean twice a year, where we get a specialist company in and they come in and they clean all of the inside of the building, they clean the floor. So that prevents any build-up of this liquid causing any odour problems. We also have an emergency situation, it's probably the wrong word, but if we do detect that the build-up has happened before we've got round to the deep clean, we will bring deep clean forward, if that makes sense. So,
Is that helpful? Okay. Any other points of clarification or questions? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Councillor Moxon, and then I'll come on to
Thank you. Just a very quick question: is there a significant cost saving to you doing this? And what is the reason for wanting to not put a filtration system in? Is it cost related, or is there another good reason that I'm missing?
it's two parts. You don't when I don't know, explain this one. Traditionally, you don't need an odour system like a carbon filtration system, which Mike's been relying to run transfer station operations. And yes, they're very expensive. They are very expensive, but that is taken into account when you start producing RDF. So the economics stack up for the RDF facility. For a straight transfer station, no, it doesn't. It's also not really necessary because we don't create odour problems in Worksop. So Councillor Adams went to Worksop last week, and I think hopefully he saw that it wasn't an issue. But yeah, it's two problem really.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hankin, I think you wanted to have a point.
Yeah, it's just on the the drainage, Councillor Adams' question, we regulate drainage within the terms of the planning permission. Condition 10 requires Veolia to submit a scheme of how they'll manage the site, but in terms of how they'll do that, the planning permission requires the waste to be deposited in the building, so it's not getting rainwater on it. So if there is any drainage coming off it, it's not being added to by rainfall. So all the transfer of the bin waste is in the building. The building's will be constructed with a concrete pad, and as Lee Holtz mentioned, there's a drainage facility which manages the dirty water from the roof water separately, and it will be appropriately managed. So yeah, there might be some leachate, some liquid come out of the waste, but it won't get outside the building, and Veolia would manage it as part of their day-to-day management and within the drainage arrangements for the site. It won't get to the wider water environment.
Right. So now we can open it up to general debate across the members. Any questions, comments, please? Councillor Adams again.
Yeah. That always helps, doesn't it, with microphones? Yeah, I did visit the site on Friday, and I'll be honest. What I did notice was a smell. I don't think I didn't notice a smell. I think I definitely noticed one rubbish smell. The area where this is located in Colic, an area that I've known probably for most of my life. Actually, it's within sort of the area of Gedden, which I've lived all of my life. Particularly, is an unusual area in that it's very much a mix of industrial and the residential, and within quite close context as well. My worry with this application is that without the carbon filter, that the smell could, and Mike mentioned it himself, could actually leak out and could add to existing smells within the locality. And I have a real concern that that's going to negatively impact residents. What I can't see is a valid reason operationally, apart from a financial perspective, why they can't do this. As far as residents are concerned, I feel that in this circumstance that we wouldn't actually be helping them locally deal with odour, and I can't see, even with what we've discussed in the cleaning, which I'm happy to hear about the cleaning, but even with that included, I can't find a way to back it. I'm trying to sort of think of all of the reasons why I could back it, but actually what I keep being overshadowed by is my overreaching concern that we are effectively opening doors up to additional smells within this area, and that worries me. So I will be at this stage, Chairman, voting against it.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, that's what we're here for at the end of the day, is to discuss and also understand the application and ultimately make a decision. So that's why we're here. We're discussing and debating. Do you want to come back on this, Mr. Hankin, at this stage? Or?
In terms of odour control on the site, specifically paragraph 38 and 39, we cover that within the report. The test, what the Environment Agency have looked at in issuing the permit, it's the boundary test. And what the boundary test says is, does the odour is it likely to cause a significant nuisance at the boundary? The test is not, it's odourless at the boundary, it's how significant is it likely to cause complaints. If it does cause complaint, then the agency wouldn't have issued a permit. If they consider it is likely to cause significant nuisance, they wouldn't have issued a permit. So you are right, Councillor Adams, that there could be odour at the site boundary, as there was at the workshop facility, but it's the level of intensity. The Environment Agency don't consider it would be intensive, and yeah, the National Planning Policy Framework, National Planning Policy for Waste, says that planning decisions should be informed by the environmental permit decisions, and If they feel the process is appropriate, then we, in terms of odour control, we should take on board that in our planning decisions. I hope that helps.
I can see you're anxious to come back on this, Councillor Adams, so I will let you come back on it, and then I'll go to Councillor Fielding.
Yeah, and thank you for that answer, and I do accept that. I think I recognise the fact that there are, in terms of what the actual legal requirements are, have they been met? Are they, as far as in terms of what the Environment Agency look for? But arguably, we are here looking from a different perspective, and I think the perspective that we're looking for is, the impact that will have on the residents of Nottinghamshire in this locality. And in my opinion, this locality is not suitable for another additional facility causing further odour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Fielding, please.
Thank you, Chair. The workshop facility is within the division I represent, and I was unable to join you on Friday due to a previous engagement, but I do know it well, do go past it quite often. What I would say is the majority of times it is odour free going past there, but there are occasions where you can smell stuff. And when permission for that was given, which I was on the committee at the time, there wasn't any housing nearby. There is, but things alter, and as I say, what might not have been a problem when we granted permission many years ago may alter in the future, as I say. But Veolia, I would say, have managed that site extraordinarily well at Worksop, and it causes very little problems, only on occasions, and dependent which way the wind is blowing. Does it cause problem to residents? What does cause more of a problem is when they're bulking up glass, which the noise of that seems to travel some distance. But as I say, Veolia have operated the workshop facility extraordinarily well.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. I'm getting an indication that Mr. Lyle would like to, our legal advisor would like to come in on this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. I just wanted to address the committee, just in case you are minded to not agree with the recommendation. Now, what my advice to you is fundamentally that, as Mike's explained to you, the county planning authority is required to effectively take its lead from the Environment Agency in regards to odour control, and a permit has been issued in relation to this particular activity. So what I would want you to bear in mind when you're considering this application is that, in the light of that, an attempt to, or a view to refuse on the basis of odour would be very difficult to sustain in the face of an appeal. If Veolia were minded to appeal a refusal, if that's how you're minded to vote. So it's very unlikely that the reason to refuse on the basis of odour would be sustainable in the face of a challenge. The other point I just wanted to make is just for your own clarity in terms of how this application interacts with the present permission. So you've got the current permission, which is for refuse-derived fuel and transfer. That doesn't disappear as a result of this application. What will happen if you are minded to grant this application, it'll have two permissions will exist at the same time, and it will be for Veolia to decide which one to actually implement. So obviously the refuse-derived fuel permission has the entire active filtration equipment, but the transfer-only permission that you may or may not grant today wouldn't have that. But the first one doesn't disappear as a result of granting the second one. Just for clarity, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Did you indicate to speak, Councillor Adams? You need to be brief if you do, but
just an understanding. Obviously, we're talking about not being able to assess it based on odour. So, what are we able to assess it on?
The council's local plan policies. So, when the council is looking at this particular kind of application, it has to be looked at in the face of the council's local plan policies, which, given that there's already the RDF fuel facility that's been granted in this particular location, it's effectively the local plan policies in relation to minerals waste and transfer as it relates to this particular site.
Okay, thank you. Just going back to what Councillor Fielding was saying about her experience with the workshop site, Councillor Fielding referred to there wasn't housing there, or as much housing there when the permission was first granted. But can we have some clarification on the housing or potential housing that's going to be near this particular application site? Because we did mention it's primarily on an industrial estate, isn't it? But
Yes,
what
I'll answer that
about the
question.
housing?
Just on the workshop facility, I had looked at our records of complaints about odour. We've had one odour complaint in, I think it's about 10 years of operation, which is reasonably low. In terms of the distance to housing, that is, I think it's, I'm getting the exact figure, I think it's 280 meters. There is a slide on the presentation. I don't know if you can wind it back, Dave. I think it's that one. Yes, it's that one there. You can see the Veolia of the application site edged in dark at the bottom. The housing is the grey area to the north, the other side of Collick Loop Road, and it's about 280 meters away.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Can I just clarify something? Ask Mike a question. Mike, you see we've only received one complaint. Where I am the district councillor for, complaints go to our environmental health officer at district council level, and then they go out and do assessments and talk to the people on the ground. Are you confident that Nottinghamshire County Council has received every single concern from, I think it's Bassett Law District Council in this aspect? Because that number one is a quite a big, large statement to make.
In a word, Councillor Smith, no, I'm not. No, we as a council have received one complaint about odour. I'm not saying the environmental health have received lots of complaints, but they haven't been forwarded to us. And normally, but my experience is normally we would become aware of them if there was an issue with odour. They do come to us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moxon, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I sit here sort of quite frustrated sometimes, in that we seem to be sort of backed into a corner as to what we can and can't vote for, and I wonder why we sometimes even bother coming to these meetings if we're sort of semi-forced into voting one way or another. To get onto my main point, with regard to like many of the members of the committee, I went to the workshop site on Friday. It was an eye-opening visit, and the smell was eye-watering as well when you actually got into the station itself. The thing I'm slightly concerned about is on the in the papers on page 36, number 24, talking about odour. One of the mitigating aspects that's going to be done is that you've got fast-acting rapid rise doors on the waste transfer station, and presumably that's to sort of try and keep as much of the smell inside the station. But it was interesting because that's completely contrary to what they've done at Worksop, where they started off doing that and then had a trial where it was opened up in the summer and the winter to the elements, and then now it's just allowed to open up completely. So it seems that this mitigation has already been taken away from Worksop, and that confuses me a little. That it's then in here as a mitigation against the odour, and I'm conscious of the fact that it smelt quite bad. I get that it wasn't particularly bad when you got on the border of it. It was a very cold day. There was no wind that day. I can imagine in the summer and when it's windy, the smell would be considerably worse. And I'm really concerned, if I'm honest, that basically, and I've had the answer from Veolia is that they are applying for this because it's a cost saving exercise. And from my mind, we're trying to save money for a corporation at the expense of local residents. So I'd be minded to vote against it, but if I'm allowed to.
No, the whole thing about a committee like this is people can vote however they wish to vote, but you just need to be, however people do vote, you need to be sure in your own mind that the parameters and the various guidance is fully understood and taken on board, and that's how it works, and that's how it is. So, but I hear exactly what you're saying. I would just say again, when we were at workshop the other day, my perception was that yes, inside the building it was a very strong smell, but when we went out, even sort of just a few feet across to the offices there, I couldn't smell it. And likewise, when we went to the roadside, I couldn't smell it either. Admittedly, we could smell the biscuit factory, which Councillor Fielding will be very familiar with. So not because, not because we're eating biscuit, but you know what I mean. But as a local member, if we'll be aware of the environmental matters from the factory. You understand the point I'm making, though. Right, Councillor Smith, you had indicated to speak. You want to? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to carry on the theme of paragraph 24, and it's not because we're sitting next to each other and looking at each other's notes, I promise. The paragraph 24 starts with the applicant acknowledges that odour emissions are frequently the subject of concern in relation to waste management facilities. Now, I know that as a fact, and I know Gedden Borough Council received many complaints around this particular locality as it borders Stoke Bardolph and Colic, and all those emissions go into the air, and whichever way the wind's blown, that's where your complaints come from. And I know they're exasperated during the summer because I've lived and breathed it there as a resident as well. Okay, fair enough. We're not proposing to introduce RDF now, but the applicant is proposing to bring in a bulk waste storage, which, let's not get around the houses. That's going to add some odours to the air somewhere, somehow. And a cold winter's day with no wind, fair enough. Hot summer's day and a summer that we've just had this year, I can bet your bottom dollar whoever the Colic district councillor is, inbox will be full. And on that basis, I just do not see, or I haven't heard, a reason to remove the air filtration. We're not doing it for what it was proposed to do in the first place, but surely whatever you're going to add there will add odour. An air filtration system will help to mitigate that and mitigate a potential increase in odour complaints from residents. Removing, and Councillor Motson just said this, removing this clause, or for want of a better word, may reduce the costs for Veolia, but it will increase, or could increase, the number of complaints to the district council. We've heard that we can't be sure that they're all passed on to the county council, so then we assess it on the potentially non-factual data. That's a problem for making decisions going forward. But we could be increasing the cost to the local district council. And I sit here like Councillor Motson does. We here today can make a decision or vote a particular way to mitigate risks or mitigate an impact to our residents. We can forego that option, but then we don't have a say 6 months, a year down the line when the complaints are coming in to the district or borough council, because we've given up our opportunity to mitigate it, and then you on the back foot. The borough council, we're not on the back foot. We've only heard of one issue over a number of years, but again, we don't know if all the issues are being flagged to us. So we're not on the back foot as a county council. The residents are on the back foot, who have to live there on a hot summer's day when the wind's blowing and they can't open their windows, which I've had a problem with in my borough seat. And they contact the county council, oh, sorry, we had an opportunity to do something about that or mitigate it, but we didn't take it. Complain to the environmental health at borough council, who can only then go and speak to this chap or his directors, and they can potentially plant some trees at the border, which Severn Trent are doing down the road, to try and absorb the smell. That's not good enough. We have a chance today to actually help mitigate that at no impact to the business day to day. The business isn't going to shut and go, and then we've got waste on the streets. No impact to the business apart from an expensive air filter, but huge potential benefit to our residents. So, on that basis, I'm going to vote against the recommendation. I'll look at the material things and come up with a legal reason why, but let's not bang ourselves on the head in 6 months' time and think, why are we in this mess? Oh yeah, we had an opportunity, but we didn't.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hankey. Would it help if you, because this comment about how the borough or the district council gets involved and their environmental health complaints and such like, but when we have our county applications such as this, we do have our own monitoring and enforcement and such like. Would it help just to explain how that works to try and allay any?
It would, but I would like to just dwell on what this plan application is seeking to get planning permission for. What we've previously granted planning permission for here as a council is for a waste transfer and a waste processing facility. So the application now, in a nutshell, is seeking planning permission to not do the waste processing activities, just operate it as a waste transfer station. And I think if you sort of have a balance that, yes, we've focused a lot this morning that not having the air filtration plant is a less efficient, or a less secure way of managing any odours what come out of that building. Totally agree. There's, that's clear. This site would operate, any odour in that building would be better controlled with the air management facility. But I think the other side of the balance is you have to look at the not doing waste processing, in particular the most smelly things. The food waste is potentially the most odorous, and certainly the refuse-derived fuel process is quite odorous. Yeah, what is refuse-derived fuel processing? Effectively, they take your black bin waste and they shred, each one of those Sainsbury's bags or whatever of black food, which we saw sat at Worksop, they take that waste and shred it into 1001 pieces. It kicks up, obviously if you break the nappy into 100 pieces rather than one piece, it smells a lot more and it puts dust and fumes into the air. And effectively, that's why you need this additional control for the waste processing activity than just a waste transfer station. So I think yes, you're right. Without the air filtration plant, there's greater chance that odour will get out of the building, but the odour is going to be less in the building because they're not doing that. It's just a waste transfer station. In terms of, I think Councillor Moxon expressed some concern of why, as a planning authority, we've got hands tied behind our back that the Environment Agency already made a decision. The purpose of the planning decision is we as a planning department have to consider whether this is an acceptable use in this location, having regard to the magnitude of environmental impact which is likely to occur. And what the report says in terms of the odour management controls is, we're not saying that there may be some odour at the boundary, but what we're saying is the permit controls and also the controls which we've got through the Planning Condition 24 will manage that level of odour, that it won't be significant. It won't be at a significant level that it should not cause complaint. 280 metres to houses is, it's a comparatively long way. And if you don't, the purpose of the planning decision is to implement the planning strategy, and our policy, the waste course strategy policy, says that these facilities should be located on industrial land remote from residential property, which it is. So this site is favoured by the waste course strategy to be developed. Coming back to the question you asked me after all that, yes, we do monitor our own planning permissions. If we get complaints, we will visit the site. We will ensure the planning conditions are complied with. And we have done that on other waste transfer facilities where there have been operational issues and improved the situation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Hawkes, you were agitating to come in on this, and are you just going to be brief with a clarification, or did you want to? Are you indicating?
If I'm allowed, I just want
very,
to,
very, very briefly.
Yeah. In terms of what, just to back Mike up, in terms of the environmental permit, if we do cause issues, the Environment Agency will visit and they will enforce the conditions of the permit if we're breaching those. But if it continues to cause problems, they will ask us to implement extra activities. And just to clarify on the finances, RDF and carbon filter go hand in hand. A straight transfer situation doesn't warrant the carbon filter system. So it's not about cost saving. It's about appropriateness of the measures.
Thank you.
I mean, if you want to let the councillor speak first, then I can speak afterwards.
Yes, I'm going to let Councillor Adams just come in briefly, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll go to Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, Mike, you said it should be in a remote industrial location. Can you confirm what defines remote, please?
Away from housing, basically. The policy encourages the siting of these facilities on industrial land. It doesn't actually give a distance. The policy, Waste Course Strategy Policy 7, sort of gives is a table of the preferred locations, and for a waste transfer station, it is on industrial land, obviously adjacent to industrial units. There will be residential properties nearby. 280 metres, I think you'd be struggling in Nottinghamshire to find an industrial land which is any further away from housing. Yeah, I'm sure there is a site somewhere in Nottinghamshire, but it is a considerable distance from housing in my experience.
Thank you. Mr. Lyle, do you want to come in on this? I think you're indicating.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address the committee to try and explain how the district enforcement of statutory nuisance would interact with this permission, just for your own understanding of the situation. So, fundamentally, under the Environmental Protection Act, a district council would take action on statutory nuisance if statutory nuisance exists. So, if you think of it this way, statutory nuisance is a bar above which the district council will take action. Now, obviously, there's an area under that, effectively, whereby there may be an issue, but it's not necessarily a statutory nuisance. That's what this permission and what the environmental permit is aimed at controlling, that area in between no smell, a statutory nuisance smell. That kind of gap is what it's supposed to be aimed at dealing with. So as you've heard today, under the environmental permit, if something is within that band and is causing problems, under the environmental permit, there would be scope to effectively manage that. So when we're looking at this permission today, again, I mean, I'm sure you've had all this in your training, but fundamentally you can only impose a condition if it's necessary for that condition. That condition makes the planning permission acceptable, and it's necessary to make the planning permission acceptable. What you've heard today is a kind of use that is being suggested does not warrant, in normal terms, a condition that requires active filtration. So the condition that's on the permission right now isn't necessary in planning terms. That's the argument that you've heard. Now, obviously, you have to take your own view on, what that means in practical terms, but that's the argument that you've heard today. But in terms of this gap between an outright statutory nuisance, where the district council would be entitled to serve an statutory nuisance notice, noise abatement, an abatement notice, the permit is the mechanism that is envisaged by the legislation to control that. The planning permission, it doesn't really, I mean, it has to a certain degree in terms of what the conditions say, but the condition itself is effectively would refer back to the permit and the powers under that permit. So it's for that reason that I've advised that it would be very difficult to sustain something whereby the argument is that the controls that are aimed at dealing with the gap up to statutory nuisance aren't adequate. So I hope that helps to explain it, but I can answer further questions on that point if you'd like me to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Councillor Owen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As an aside, I think this demonstrates yet again the absurdity of the two-tier system of local government when environmental health departments and the county council aren't county councils and environmental health aren't necessarily in direct contact. But that is an aside. I wanted to follow on from what Councillor Moxon said and the legal advice that well, it's more than advice, it's really an instruction telling us which way we've got to vote. The reason that it appears to be an instruction is that we've got to take our lead from the Environment Agency. Well, I'm sorry, no, I don't. I take my lead from the interests and well-being of the residents of Nottinghamshire. And they may not necessarily coincide with the interests of the Environment Agency. A group of people, no doubt, sitting in some ivory tower, locked away in Westminster, not able to get into work because of the snow now. So, no, I don't take my lead from the Environment Agency at all, not necessarily from the legal team here as well. Mr. Hankin talked, and I think I wrote it down as he said it. But if I've miswritten him, I'm sure he'll correct me. He said the site would be better controlled if the system were in place. I think that's what you said. The site would be better controlled if the system were in place. Well, why shouldn't we be going for the best systems? Why shouldn't we, Chairman, going for the best systems? We're told that the nearest, the boundary is 280 metres. In my day, that was about 300 yards. I can picture 300 yards. And I would say that is approximately the distance between here and the far end of the car park. It's not very far at all, as far as I'm concerned. And I thought Councillor Fielding was very charitable when she said, well, we can only smell it on a few days or from time to time. Well, why should residents have to smell anything at all if there is a system that is available that will stop it happening? That I can't understand. The nub of the argument, as far as Veolia are concerned, is it's going to save them some money. Well, I can well understand that they want to save money, but not at the expense of our residents. That is not acceptable. We're told that it won't allow, if we give permission, it won't allow a significant release of odour. Well, what does significant mean? It won't allow a significant. Depends on the wind direction. The Environment Agency say the boundary test is not odourless. Well, why? Why? If we've got a system that could make it odourless, why shouldn't we insist on it? Despite what the Environment Agency say, despite what our legal people say, as far as I am concerned, I'm here to represent the residents of Nottinghamshire. I've been elected to do that. The Environment Agency haven't. And so if there's a system that will make things better for residents, then why shouldn't we go with it? And so I have to say, Chairman, I am not convinced by the arguments to support the application, and I shall vote against it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Owen. Far be it for me to defend or speak on behalf of the Environment Agency, because that was the last thing I would do. Well, it's not the last thing I would do, but I'm not here to do that. But going back to your comment about them being in an ivory tower in London somewhere, I'm pretty sure they're actually based in offices just off Lady Bay Bridge, which is not a million miles away from Colic. And so I think that just needs to be made clear, because you did make quite a sweeping comment about an organisation that's not here to speak for itself or explain itself and defend itself. So I'm just making that point. Councillor Creamer, please.
Yeah, very very quickly. Councillor Owen sort of not spoilt, but actually just going along the same sort of lines that that I'm going, but in the opposite direction, in the respect that legally on planning grounds and all the rest, we're not capable of questioning the actual Environment Agency, and they're not capable of actually questioning us. It's a two-way thing. We give planning permission for whatever reasons. They can't object to it because of whatever they think may or may not be right. It has to be within planning grounds and in their environment reasons. I know that site. I know it does smell every now and then, regardless from other sites. There's at least 3 processing down there. There's an inside go-kart place which is on the map there as well. So it really is an industrial area. The houses that are a distance away, one of them is at one end. There's actually a private industrial estate next to a private recycling centre. And at the other end, there's the city's Enver one. So, and that's not quite in the middle, but it's in that sort of area. So yes, you can argue that there's already plenty of smells in there, but it is allocated in the Gedling plan as an industrial area. And I would actually totally go along with getting the best system of all in there. I would ask Veolia to keep the system in. I would actually ask them to do that, but they've asked for planning permission, and I can't see a planning reason not to turn it down. If the Environment Agency thinks it will work, then we're not supposed to. Sorry, Mr. Owen, we're not supposed to question that. By the same token, they're not supposed to question us on our planning. So yes, I would ask them. I would certainly ask Veolia. Would you consider it? Would you keep it? Would you keep it in because it's more environmentally friendly? But we can't just turn it down. And my personal opinion is, if they went to appeal it, we would actually lose the appeal.
Yeah.
So, on that grounds, I will be supporting it. But I've got massive sympathy with it. There should be something someplace that actually in law says that, oh yeah, we can there's a system there, you must use it. But that's the Environmental Agency's policy, not ours, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. And indeed, we are in the situation we are in. It is what it is, and you've heard the arguments for and against, but also the legal advisory points as well. I'd also just remind colleagues as well that on page 17, where it refers to the consultations, the Borough Council, who are the environmental health people in the area, didn't send a representation in, and so that I would have thought gives an indication as to what their view is, and they would have had plenty of opportunity to do so. And likewise, we know that we've spoken about the Environment Agency and don't wish to make any formal comment on this. What is a variation to an existing permission? So that's where we are now. I don't see any other members indicating. Sorry, Councillor Camilleri. Yes, I did have you written down. Yeah,
been very quiet, which is unusual. I don't understand why these aren't just part of this kind of job anyway. You know, environmental smells and things for people. Why isn't it part? If you're going to want to keep these guys, if the smell wasn't too bad at Worksop, we were there. However, I should imagine on a hot day it would be quite bad. And they're building some houses just over the way, probably 300 metres away or something like that. But I don't understand, why isn't this just part? We're going to build a transfer plant. We're going to do anything to do with waste. We'll put a filtration plant in. I am not clear on that. Councillor Creamer, is there one already in the plant now at Colic? I'm asking you because you mentioned it.
Very quick, I know quite as long as, but there are at least 2 other plants there as well, including the main one for the city, Enver, which is literally almost across the road from of the new site.
Because and like Councillor Owen said, we're not here to. We're here to look after the people of Nottinghamshire's interest, and if this is going to smell and this is going to do it, and we could do something about it, and I think we should do. I think just saying, well, we're not going to do it, and then in hindsight, when we're back here or some environmental having to go later on, then it's too late. I think we should make it the best we can now, and not leave it to the future. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. Mr. Lyle, please.
Thank you, Chair. Now, please acknowledge I'm not telling you what to do, okay? I'm just providing you with the framework of how the decision should be made, and what the relevant considerations are. And in that context, also what appeal would happen, which is sensible, because if you refuse against offer a recommendation, the council would be at risk of costs in an appeal. So that's an important consideration in this matter. But in terms of, I've heard councillors say we're not led by the Environment Agency. What I would say is, as you will have heard in your training, under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, you're obliged to consider the council's local plan, national planning policy, and other material considerations when determining an application. Now, as the report says, national planning policy makes it clear that matters relating to pollution control fall within the remit of the Environment Agency. So to ignore the Environment Agency's determination in relation to the permit would be to be making a decision against national policy, which you are obliged to have consideration to. So whilst it's true that you don't have to listen to the Environment Agency generally, the reality of the situation is national planning policy makes it a requirement for you to consider that pollution control is a matter to be dealt with by the Environment Agency. And a decision that ignores that would be contrary to policy, and therefore would not be in accordance with your direction under the Planning Compulsory Purchase Act to make decisions in accordance with national planning policy and local planning policy and other material considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Councillor Smith, I'll let you come back.
Thank you. And just a question for the legal officer, more clarification than advice, if you may. Previous planning decisions is a material planning condition. So, for clarification and not advice, would that match if we voted against this recommendation?
How do you mean a previous planning?
If you have a look at material planning conditions, previous planning decisions comes up as an option. So this has previous planning permission as a condition to bring these air filters in. So if we vote against the recommendation today, does that fit within the previous planning decisions material condition?
Yeah, so existing planning permissions are a material consideration for you, definitely. In that context, the advice I've given before about necessity of the conditions attached to the old permission, that's also a material consideration. So fundamentally, it's a balance in relation to what already exists and whether what exists right now and the conditions in relation to that existing permission are necessary to make the proposed development acceptable in planning terms. That's how the context in which you have to look at the old permission. Is what's attached to that necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hankin.
Yeah, I've said it once before. I think we have to just keep remembering that the processes in this building will be different to what we previously granted planning permission for. It'll be a waste transfer facility, not a waste processing facility if this is granted planning permission without the air filtration plant. It will be less, the activities there will be less odorous, and therefore you don't need quite such a high level of odour control. It's not uncommon in all decisions taken in local authority planning, in your day-to-day life. You may drive a Ford rather than Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce might do the job better, but a Ford does the job. I know that's totally different, but I think what I'm saying is that it is the industry practice. Councillor Owen mentioned, I did use the word significant, and he said, what does that mean? When I use the word significant, that is a level which is likely to cause cause for complaints on odour at the site boundary. I'm being quite clear that I'm not saying this will be not odorous at the site boundary, but it won't cause significant nuisance, like at a level likely to cause complaint. And that is the basis of why the officer's report is recommending it should be granted planning permission.
Okay, thank you. Right, goodness me, we've had a good discussion on this, haven't we? And never let it be said that what can seem on the face of it, it's a simple application, is going to be simple. It plainly isn't, and there are a lot of strong feelings which I understand completely. But at the end of the day, we've got the application in front of us, which is we've heard the explanation as to what the difference in working is, the reason the application is being submitted. We've also heard and we know that the site is on an industrial estate where there are other third-party waste facility operations doing what they do. I'd also remind ourselves about the publicity again, as well as the comments or the lack of comments I referred to earlier from the Gedling and the Environment Agency. Paragraph 18 makes it clear that the application has been advertised in the Evening Post, and letters have been sent to surrounding business properties, and in accordance with policy, and no representations received. So I just balance the argument for and against. So that's what we're doing here. So I don't see any other hands indicating to speak. I think we need to come to a decision. You want to come? No. I think we need to make a decision on this. As I said earlier on, and was made clear, no one is told here how to vote, but at the same time, you have to vote in line with policy guidelines and all the rest of it, as well as the good points or the negative points of the application. It's a balancing act, and we all know that, and everyone accepts and understands that. So we've got the recommendation in front of us, which is on page 24. Unless anyone else wants to speak, I don't think they do. So let's have a show of hands. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour of the recommendation on page 24, please show. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyone? And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that means that permission is refused. So what we need to do now is we need to have some reasoning explanation as to reasons for refusal. So
planning reason.
Yeah, so we need to have a planning reason. So who's going to produce that?
Can we adjourn? And
well, you've made a decision. You know why you've refused. So you need to come up with a reason now.
Thank you. I think we'd like to refuse on the basis of the previous planning decision has all the required elements to improve the situation in the area, to deal with, mitigate any smell, to create the perfect environment for dealing with the issues that we experienced on site when we were there, and we believe that should remain in play. There's also a question. I mean, I know that Councillor Creamer talked about proposals in the development plan as being this is an industrial area. You know, if this is an industrial area, why have we got houses so close to that as well? So again, there's that. Design approach materials. I think that's probably it.
It may be a good idea to adjourn.
I think on reflection, given I know what you tried to say, and it's a way of saying it. Perhaps we will take an adjournment, and I'm happy to do that. So what time is it now? 11:30. Well, it's 11:35. Let's take maximum 10 minutes. So let's be back. Well, aim for 10. Let's be back for 11:45. If that's all right. Yeah. We'll have an adjournment. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I've got a thumbs up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. It's just gone 11:45. We had to adjourn for procedural matters as much as anything, and just to be clear what we're doing, and so everyone understands where we are. So I'm going to just ask Mr. Lyle, our legal advisor, just to explain the process, what happens next. So over to Mr. Lyle, please.
Thank you, Chair. So what we'll need now is a motion proposed by Councillor explaining the reasons for the refusal and delegating the formal issue of the decision notice to officers and reasons for refusal to the officers in conjunction with to be approved by the Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. So, can I have a mover of that recommendation, please? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. We've already granted for a facility with strong odour controls in a previous application. We feel that this current proposal makes those controls less robust, which we should not support in this location in regards to its location to properties and subsequent odour complaint. The site is too close to housing with regard to potential for odour release from the facility, and so it should be refused. Officers, if you could please draft a reason for refusal which contains appropriate references to the development plan policy to purvey the above concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Moxon.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. So, is that clear to everybody that the reasons are going to be drafted up and agreed, and then will be formally announced? Well, not announced, but will be reported in conjunction with me as the chairman and Councillor Creamer as the vice chair. And we need to, yes, we do need to vote on this. So that was just really pointing out what we're actually, or summarising what we're doing. So, need a show of hands in favour of that recommendation, please. So, anyone against that recommendation? And was any abstentions? And 1 abstention. So that's 10 was for that. How many was it? Was it 10 in favour and one abstaining? Right. Okay. Thank you. That's an interesting agenda item, and with very strong comments on there. But we have made a decision, so on we go. The next item on the agenda is the Development Management Progress Report, and I'll hand over to Mr. Marsh for this, please. Oh, sorry, you're Mr. Hankin, you're doing it, I beg your pardon.
Agenda item 6 is the monthly report of planning applications received by the Development Management Team, covering the period 14th of October until the 25th of November 2022, and the decisions made for the period between the 1st and since the last report to members on the 1st of November 2022. The report also identifies the applications likely to come before committee in the coming months. In terms of a couple of matters I'd like to raise, we've made a decision yesterday on a waste management facility at Danes Hill landfill site. It's been refused planning permission to operate a soil treatment facility. It's a long-standing and locally controversial plan application which included the treatment of soils contaminated with asbestos waste. Planning committee considered a report on this in October 2020, but we had an intervention at that time from the Secretary of State which prevented the council making a decision unless and until an environmental impact assessment had been completed and submitted to the planning authority to support the planning submission. The applicant has sought to progress an environmental permit from the Environment Agency for this site, but this permit application process has now concluded that the processing of the soils contaminated with asbestos waste is unsafe. The planning application has remained undetermined whilst the permit has been under consideration, but in light of the Environment Agency's decision and the continuing failure failure of the applicant to undertake the required environmental impact assessment. We've now taken the decision to refuse planning permission for the facility under delegated powers. So, that's an application off our books from about 2 years ago. In terms of the future applications going to planning committee, a couple of updates on that list which was prepared a week or so ago. The Nest Farm and the Quarry planning applications, I think there's a planning application for an extension to the quarry and two supported in section 73s. That's likely now to go to the 28th of February meeting. We're waiting the response from the Environment Agency on flood risk. We're likely to also report an application at the Outward Academy, Portland, Nettleton Road, for an extensions to this county council run facility to the 28th of February. Any questions about the report, I'm happy to deal with.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No. I really just, your report about the Danes Hill application is interesting, which assures colleagues that not all applications are routinely approved, and they are refused, even at a delegated level as well. And looking ahead to the January meeting, we will be quite busy there with quarry applications again in the members, which are always of interest. So unless anyone else wishes to make any comments on this, no. So that's the final item on today's meeting. Thank you all for your contributions, and also colleagues, officers, for your advice and input and patience. This is the final meeting before Christmas, so I wish a very happy Christmas and best wishes for the new year to us all. And we look forward to the new year, which is rapidly approaching. So thank you. I'll close the meeting at 11:54. Thank you.